Salute, salute, salute. Bow. Hey man, I'm about to piggyback off the real Marlowe. And a few other platforms that I, pay attention to. I don't want to say this platform channel name wrong. I think it's called Pull Counter Boxing. I might be incorrect, but I'm sure I'm going to be shouting this channel out in the future. So to the Pull Counter Punch, the Pull Counter Report, Pull Counter Boxing, not 100%, but it's Pull Counter something. I think it might be the Pull Counter Report, but it's a platform that's very mature. We talk about some real boxing. I salute. But the real Marlowe TV inspired this. Plus, I kind of wanted to talk about it anyway. Shawn Porter says he's not the bar, the measuring stick. He's not the common opponent between Errol Spence and Bud Crawford. He's not the fight you want to use as a measuring stick, because styles make fights. He also said before, when he talked to Brian Custer, that he's pretty sure that Errol Spence would even agree to him with this. If Errol Spence fought Shawn Porter a second time, he would fight him differently. If Terrence Bud Crawford fought Shawn Porter a second time, he would fight the exact same fight. And I agree with that. But can you use Shawn Porter? I think like Mike Tyson said, look at the way Terrence Bud Crawford beat Shawn Porter and look at the way Errol Spence fought against Shawn Porter. And a lot of people ask this question, who looked more impressive? And I have to say, on the surface, if you just look at surface value, there's no doubt that Terrence Bud Crawford looked better against Shawn Porter than Errol Spence did. If you look below the surface, then your point of view changes. And I feel like sometimes, now I know a lot, Bud Crawford gets a lot of hate undeservingly on this extreme side. Errol Spence gets a lot of hate. Some self-inflicted, some deserved critique, but he gets a lot of extreme hate on this side too. Where I don't see a lot of the redemption qualities that Errol Spence has displayed. I don't never see that get the same shine and highlight. I see more negative being focused on Errol Spence, but I do see some people overpraising Errol Spence and over glorifying and putting him on a pedestal. And I see some people on the other end doing the same thing with Bud Crawford, giving him too much credit, giving him too much high praise and putting him up on a pedestal. So there has to be some kind of common ground, some medium, a bridge. You know what I'm saying? Me, I can bridge that. I can see both sides of the equation. I ain't no, and I'll be honest. Some people say, man, you not biased. I'm not gonna lie. I can't say I'm 100% unbiased, because I am more in support of Errol Spence. Naturally, and humans gonna be biased one way or another way, and I lean towards Errol Spence. Let that be known. But I have no malicious intent or hate, or I don't try to over criticize Terrence Bud Crawford or tear down his character, or even really tear down his resume. I try to look at his resume and his accomplishments and his accolades unbiased as possible, call a spade, and the same thing for Errol Spence. I try to look at the nuances. I look at the black, the white, everything in between, the gray areas. I try to look at every fucking thing, you know what I'm saying, with an unbiased eye. When it comes down to who's going to win the fight, I lean towards Errol Spence. So naturally, I look for more avenues for victory for Errol Spence. But that doesn't mean that I don't see the avenues in the I don't see the lane. I don't see the abilities for Terrence Bud Crawford to win this fight. I look at all kinds of ways. You know what I'm saying? But the topic of the discussion is, like Mike Tyson said, is Shawn Porter. But look at Errol Spence against Shawn Porter and look at Terrence Bud Crawford against Shawn Porter. And unfortunately, you can't really use that fight to determine a whole lot. First of all, the triangle theory is just flawed. It doesn't work. We all know that the triangle theory does not work. And we look at common opponents, and we look at Kell Brook, because we know Errol Spence fought Kell Brook, and we look at Shawn Porter. We know both Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence, and Shawn Porter, all those guys have rumbled one way or another way at different points in their career. But the issue with Shawn Porter, and this is where I feel like some Terrence Bud Crawford fans take Errol Spence fans and insult their intelligence, and you can go either way with it. But on this subject to me is a lot more glaring and try to get it swept underneath the rug, because the real common opponent that they really have, the closest thing you can say to a common opponent at the prime level, would be Shawn Porter. You can't say Kell Brook. I wanted to say Kell Brook for Terrence Bud Crawford. When Terrence Bud Crawford was about to fight Kell Brook, I was excited because I said, okay, now this is what we really want to see Terrence Bud Crawford be able to do against Kell Brook. But then when you followed the whole journey, you just seen Kell Brook wasn't going to be anything close to what he used to be. You know what I'm saying? A lemon or a ghost ship or a shell of himself, whatever you want to call it. To me, I took my hat off to him for giving the effort against Terrence Bud Crawford. But at the same time, you could tell that he was putting himself in a situation where he really couldn't win. And when he didn't win, and the way he lost, it was something where I say I give all credit to Terrence Bud Crawford, but don't get it twisted and look like Kell Brook was in some kind of a great shape to put on a great performance. He just wasn't. You watch everything. You watch him before, when he was talking about the fights, how much weight he's carrying, who was he training, where was he training with, like he was bouncing around. I think he might have stopped at Crunk Gym a little bit. You seen, like, you know, media workouts or leading up to the fight, and you seen he didn't have his main trainer. He didn't have none of the backings that he normally would have, and he just went into this fight half cocked. You know what I'm saying? Shooting blanks. It was like you seen him hitting the punching bag a little bit, and you seen him on the treadmill a lot, like in the basement of a room with a treadmill in front of the TV, basically just doing cardio to strip off weight. And when I watched the whole journey of Kell Brook up to the Terrence Bud Crawford fight, and then you look at him at the weigh-ins on the scale, and he looked good on the scale. You say, well, he do look good on the scale. You know what I'm saying? But you look at how he looked in the fight, and his body language, his intensity, his grit. You can just see that you wasn't going to get the Kell Brook that would bring out the best performance of Terrence Bud Crawford. And it is what it is. You just kind of give Terrence Bud Crawford his credit, but you can't stretch it too far past that. So when he was about to fight Shawn Porter, we know Shawn Porter is always going to be Shawn Porter. You know what I'm saying? So when Shawn Porter was about to fight Terrence Bud Crawford, even though it was a whole lot of back and forth, that's my friend, we buddies, I never said we always said we wasn't gonna fight each other, and if we did fight each other, it was gonna be on our terms. All of that leading up to it, I said, who cares? Shawn Porter is gonna be Shawn Porter. I want to see the best of Shawn Porter, because I know that's going to bring out the best of Terrence Bud Crawford. Even though we look like Terrence Bud Crawford got all the tools in the world to beat Shawn Porter, we still got to see him execute it on a higher level against Shawn Porter. And you watch the same thing. You watch out for every little meticulous detail. If you get a haircut, if the way he looked in training, the way him and Kenny Porter vibe is, you know what I'm saying? You watch everything. pre-fight, during fight, post-fight. And it was a damn shame what Shawn Porter did with Terrence Bud Crawford. As far as, I'm not going to say he wasn't 100%. I'm not going to say he didn't put, he came in for Terrence Bud Crawford. And he was on a level where he knew he could make, it would make Terrence Bud Crawford look good. It was like giving him a boost up. It wasn't like what Malik Scott, what dude named Malik Scott, whatever dude who trained Deontay Wilder for that Tyson Fury trilogy. It wasn't like that much of a, I'm just gonna really do a dive and let you punch me and I'm a flaw. It wasn't like that. It was like, I'm gonna train hard. I'm gonna bring my B game or my A game. I'm gonna bring my A game. You know what I'm saying? It was almost how Shawn Porter looked against Adrian Broner-ish. It was Shawn Porter how he looked against Yordenis Ugas. It was Shawn Porter how he looked against Sebastian Formella. It wasn't the best version of Shawn Porter past that. And a lot of the credit you give to Terrence Bud Crawford, because you could still see the difference between what Terrence Bud Crawford did versus what Errol Spence did. You know, Terrence Bud Crawford was boxing off the back foot, setting up traps and doing that crazy little pivot, check hooks, pushing, you know, using Shawn Porter's own momentum, hooking him off, pushing him into the corner. You know, but you've seen a lot of that. You've seen the trickiness, the craftiness, the boxing execution with a slick, not a slick boxer, but you've seen what Terrence Bud Crawford could do against the Shawn Porter, he was doing like Shawn Porter was more like a bull rushing in, and then, you know, Terrence Bud Crawford would be more like the matador or whatever you call it, dude. He's doing olays, and it was kind of customized. It made Terrence Bud Crawford look great, and he is great, and it will take nothing away from him. But you do have to look at Shawn Porter and say, Shawn Porter, a lot of things he did, I know he could do better. I know he could do different. But at the same time, he's not going to push himself to that limit to do certain things against Terrence Bud Crawford the same way he pushed himself to do things against Errol Spence. It was just a different mentality and intensity. It was just Errol Spence fought Shawn Porter in a way that made Shawn Porter look great and didn't make Errol Spence look great. And if you look at every little meticulous detail, Errol Spence wasn't the best version of himself leading up to the Shawn Porter fight. Even in the weigh-ins, you kind of looked at Errol Spence and say, you can see where he's not 100% even on the weigh-in day on the scales. You know, he didn't look as strong as he could look, possibly. He looked like he did last-minute efforts to cut weight, things like that, a little emaciated. When he rehydrate back up, you can see his muscle bellies hadn't filled back out. He didn't look solid as much as he would before in the past. On the other hand, when you've seen Terrence Bud Crawford weigh in for Shawn Porter, Terrence Bud Crawford looked like the absolute perfect weapon. Dialed in, sharpest knife in the drawer. Terrence Bud Crawford looked incredible for Shawn Porter. You look at the body language, Shawn Porter doing the weigh-in for, he's all happy, smiling. He's always smiling, but you can just see Kenny Porter, different energy. Shawn Porter energy was different. It was like he a lot of the times he was just giving the stage to Terrence Bud Crawford. Terrence Bud Crawford was just geeked up. He was zoned in, tuned in, sharp, crispy. Shawn Porter was passive. He was just kind of happy to be there. It was like a farewell type of a vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was almost like I'm celebrating my friend. I'm elevating my friend. I'm celebrating the end of my career, and I get to do it in a way where I'm not going to look terrible. I'm going to put on a great performance, but I'm not going to go to that level. Like, everybody who does anything, whether you sing or dance or lift weights or you box or mixed martial arts or you skate, or you at your job, whatever you do, everybody know there is a level that you can go to. You can make any comparison. You can compare it to some Dragon Ball Z, or the Glow with Bruce Leroy, or the Quan with, you know what I'm saying, Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. when I'm all heart, mother. I'm talking about everybody knows there's a zone that athletes and performers and artists and everybody can go into that's on next level. It's off the charts, it's off the scales. It's not a game, it's not giving 100%. It's past that. It's way past that. It's just your vibrations is on a whole different level. It's hard to duplicate it. It's hard to do it more than once in your lifetime. It's hard to stay at that level. Shawn Porter was the closest to that level I ever seen against Errol Spence. And it still wasn't enough. He was nowhere near that level against Terrence Bud Crawford. And like you said, you give Terrence Bud Crawford a lot of credit for taking away